Rescue the Embassy Mission is a 1989 game for the NES. It was originally simply called Hostages when it was released for home computers such as the Amiga, Apple II, Commodore 64, DOS, to name a few, in 1988. It was then ported, retitled, and released in 1989. I'm not sure why it was retitled, but it's safe to say that a game called Hostages might not have sat well with Nintendo at the time. And also, believe it or not, at the time there was quite a bit of hostage crises frequent in the news and shit, so I'm sure that might have had something to do with it. Anyways, it was ported, released, and published, whatever, by Kemco Saika, I don't know, who were known for other NES games like Shadowgate, Bugs Bunny, Birthday Blowout, Deja Vu, and others for the NES. While maybe not for the impatient, it's a very interesting game that definitely had some cool things going on, and there is not one other game like it on the NES. For better or worse, it has that going for it. The only other game that's kinda like it is maybe Metal Gear, as it has a stealth sneak element that Metal Gear was often credited in pioneering, even though, let's be honest, the NES version of Metal Gear sucked and was a terrible port of the MSX Classic, but there was very few games with a stealth element. Also, there were a few games like Bester's Quest that implemented this 3D first-person section thing, but these were always pretty weak, pretty terrible, or unpleasant, or just awkward, as the NES wasn't meant to handle any 3D first-person stuff at all. And come to think of it, not even the Genesis or SNES could really do this, so at least this game pulled it off somewhat admirably. Though that's not saying much these days. Having a map didn't hurt either. Other games that kind of remind me of this game wouldn't come out till a decade or so later, mainly the Tom Clancy-based games like Splinter Cell and especially Rainbow Six. I mean, I know Rainbow Six is based off the title of Tom's book from 1998. Had that book or whatever been published exactly a decade earlier, and for whatever reason, if someone wanted to publish a video game with his name on it, like a lot of NES games back then were made with athletes and names and shit back then, so maybe this game might as well have been considered the first Rainbow Six game. Had this fictional timeline I'm making up right now been the case, I'm sure this game would have been less overlooked and more remembered, and who knows, maybe considered a classic in its own right. Not saying it's a great game, but again, neither was Metal Gear on the NES, but that still holds its place in gaming history for what it brought to the table, which was something different from all the usual shmups and action platformers that flooded the NES back in the day. Anyway, I'll shut the fuck up and get to the game.
Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull?
So yeah, the game is built up of these three sections, different types of gameplay. Well, actually four if you consider this rope propelling thing. But the first is basically your sneak gameplay, and your object is to get your snipers in place for the second part, which is the sniping section of the game, and then there's the third part, which is infiltration, kill all the terrorists, rescue the hostages type section. Oh yeah, and the repelling thing. But before getting into all that, let's look at this setup. Without a manual, you don't know what this shit is or really means. You can only guess. But basically, one section is your difficulty, and the other one is basically the conditions of the gameplay. So Lieutenant is pretty much easy. The searchlights are slow. There's not that many. You can, the bullets seem to miss you a lot, and enemy reaction is slow. Captain is normal difficulty. Everything's the same, but a little faster. Commander is hard. The searchlights move faster. There's more of them. Reaction speed is a little quicker from enemies and stuff. And you don't want to shoot the hostages. And there's no enemy dots on your map anymore. There's a number over up on top telling you how many are there, but you won't see them on the map, and that makes it quite a pain. But yeah. Anyway, that's that. Now, selecting your mission is a lie because there are no other missions. This is like the conditions of your of the mission, I guess. So, like training, you get 20 minutes to do the whole thing. It's real easy. There's no cutscene when you beat the game. Big whoop. The next one, you get 16 minutes to do it, and you get new searchlight patterns, and it's pretty average. Whatever. Ultimatum is 14-minute time limit. It's hard. And hostages also start to appear in the third level. I kind of recommend this one, I guess. Trigger, you got 12 minutes. It's a lot more hazardous and a lot of hostages. Searchlights are faster in the first level. And then Jupiter, you get 10-minute time limit. That makes it kind of fun because you're kind of like under stress to do shit fast, but you don't want to screw up. So this is actually the hardest difficulty. So it's kind of like the mission settings along with the rank settings, kind of makes your own difficulty, which is kind of cool. You get to choose all these different ones. So there aren't really different missions as much as there are just different difficulty settings, as the levels and layout are always the same. Also, this means, yes, the game can be beaten or gone through in less than 10 minutes. I mean, if you put it on the easiest setting, you can run through that the whole game 3-4 minutes. So this, this may not be the shortest NES game ever, but damn, it's gotta be close. Though the hardest difficulty session will hand you your ass, so if you're not seasoned. After all, it is a rescue the hostage scenario game, and it's actually the most fun and intense when you're under the pressure of a time constraint. So there's a lot of good replay value here, and it also makes it a good, quick pick up and play sort of game when you got a few minutes to kill. So it's not really the game's biggest fault at all. Sometimes quality beats out quantity. So the controls are pretty simple. For this section, you have your rolling evade button, press down to get in a crawling fuck the ground position, and up lets you dive into bushes or enter into halls to avoid detection from the spotlights. Get to your designated position and then do it again with another one of your men, aptly named Mike, Steve, and Jumbo. You ideally get all three of them to their spots. I actually screwed up a couple times passing my marker, even getting so far as to the very end of the map and had to backtrack, so it helps to know which spot is the goal for each character. Next, you snipe. Sometimes it's busy with heads, sometimes even having more than one dude in one window, but sometimes it's a waiting game with no one showing face. It's like fishing, seems a bit random. Controls are simple enough. You move with the D-pad on what is essentially a 3x3 grid, and if you have all three snipers in place, there are 3 sides. One button shoots, the other speeds up the scrolling so you can scan all the windows, quickly looking for a terrorist silhouette in the window. The crosshair jiggles around quite a bit, which brings a bit of realism to the game. Again, if no one is showing up, you can hit select to go to another team member selection, and if you want, pick another side of the building to see if there's a bit more activity going on. You can feel a bit of pressure as the clock is winding down, but the more terrorists you can take out, the better, as once you go inside the building, the less enemies inside, the better, especially on the higher difficulty levels. So at least there's some feeling of strategy here. Next, you have to get inside by scaling down these walls. You rappel down by pressing down, but if you take too much on at once, you fall to your death. So you have to tiptoe doing an up, down type thing. It takes a bit of patience, but it isn't too hard. Press a button on top of a window to dive through. Now you can actually continue to scale down these buildings all the way to the bottom floor. I never realized this playing the game back in the day. There's not really an advantage to this that I can see, but it's cool you have the option to start on the bottom floor and work your way up if you want. Maybe this catches the terrorists off guard, I don't know. But generally you save time and patience just going in at the top. Once inside, you just kind of got to get used to this shit by doing it a few times. The D-pad moves you around, you can fire. I find quick little bursts usually work best, especially on harder difficulties, but if you're firing away, you can actually kind of aim around. I didn't know this back in the day, and again, it's not something that really seems to have any advantage though. Sometimes waving your aim left to right seems to work okay. Also, if a bad guy is firing on you, you can quickly turn left or right and get a jump on him when he re-enters the screen, as it can feel like a crapshoot on harder difficulties if you have a standoff going on. Basically, really learn how to use the map and it makes things easier. Also, it's worth mentioning there seems to be blood in this game, which back then added a bit of a whoa factor, as very few games on the NES were able to slip by with any sort of blood in the games. In fact, the only games I can think of are maybe Bionic Commando, The Unlicensed Chiller, and maybe Monster Party and Maniac Mansion maybe had a subtle amount of blood in them, but I don't really remember. But yeah, that's just another thing this game brought to the table. Blood! And that's really it. Kill everybody under the time limit and see how you score and do it again. Ideally, no one in your party has died and all hostages are rescued, and you haven't decided to go rogue and kill all the hostages yourself. I didn't even know you could kill the hostages way back when, but whatever. And that's Rescue the Embassy mission. In conclusion, it's a decent NES game in short bursts. It's not for everyone, and after a few rounds, you'll want to move on to something else, but you may find yourself picking it up again once in a while. I think it deserves some credit for being original. There's no other game like it on the NES, and maybe one of the earliest examples of what would later become known as the tactical shooter. The sound isn't bad, the main theme isn't your basic lazy 1 to 4 bar loop, and sonically it doesn't grind your shit with annoying tones or sound effects like some games from this era. And having no music during sniping and such isn't lazy, it's actually a nice touch. I like how the music gets quieter when you're hiding, ramping up when you jump out of cover. It's a nice subtle way of ramping up the intensity. The music in the first person section is fine and does its job too. If you can pick it up for under $5, there's nothing wrong with having it in your collection. I do. Thanks for watching.